When you're looking around at college football right now and the landscape of who's going to win the national championship or who's going to win what league and so forth, I think ESPN's Bill Conley really is appropriately diagnosing the situation as it stands right now. He said it's a pretty unique environment talking about college football heading into 2022 because although in the past we have had transfers, we have never really experienced total rebuilds of college football teams like we're seeing right now. The outlier, there are two outliers so far. Georgia in 22 has been an outlier. They've not gotten a transfer that I'm aware of. And Clemson, which is like got old man Dabo hanging out. So those two have been a little bit different. Georgia has used transfers, though. Clemson has really resisted that. This is what Bill had to say about the Dogs and knowing what we know with Georgia coming into 2022. He said they're the projected number 3 in the S&P, just a hair behind Ohio State and Alabama. I feel like we have a very, very good read on Georgia, Alabama too, if we're being honest. After that, I'm not really sure. He said, Ohio State, we have no idea what their defense is capable of. If their defense is in the top 15 in the country, they are probably the best team in the nation. But we don't know if that's going to happen. No, we don't. Last year was not a great indicator of that. He goes on to say, and this is kind of his point, Michigan had massive assistant coach turnover. Oklahoma is fifth with lots of coaching changes there. Clemson is sixth. We have no idea if their offense is going to be merely average. We have no idea if their offense is going to be merely average. Then they are probably a top 5 team, but it wasn't average last year. Dabo responded to that by promoting from within for his coordinator, talking about the offensive coordinator. And Bill goes on to say, which I really didn't like all that much. He says Notre Dame has a new coach. It is a pretty unique environment. Is it possible that we could see Georgia and Alabama play 4 times in a 30-game stretch? In other words, more than 10% of your games would be Georgia, Alabama for the two teams. Is it possible that that's what we could see? We could see the two of them squaring off in the championship game again, and then possibly playing for the college football playoff national championship game. Ohio State is going to be a real problem in the fourth game scenario. Um, I'm not sure I'm ready to bet the house on that, but we are at a point where those three schools have right now separated themselves in a way that it's hard for others to catch up. We saw it doesn't mean that there's not going to be one-off seasons. We had a couple one-offs this past year. First of all, my Michigan beat Ohio State's brains in. That was certainly a one-off, or was it? We had Georgia winning the national championship for the first time in 40 years. Was that a one-off? We had Clemson missing the playoff, not even winning their division in the ACC, which is really embarrassing. Was that a one-off? So we had a few scenarios where we don't know if we're going to see Georgia hoisting trophies again. But are we going to see this another time? Are we going to see Georgia and Bama just get really used to playing one another? I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, the biggest thing is that you've got the conference championship right in the middle of December, right at the beginning of December, where these two teams would fight in Atlanta before basically for seeding. If you pick up DAWGSTRUCTION today, you get our 2022 preview. You can pick it up down below. Order DAWGSTRUCTION. If you're missed out on that, if you want to get it for you or a friend, you can get that, and our preview is going to come with it for free. If you just want the preview, that's great. We got no problem with that. You can click that down below. Brock Bowers is on the cover. I mean, Brenton Cox and Warren Erickson are on there too. They are not the focus, though. It is definitely this guy from Napa who can't sip wine yet, but can get major NIL deals. Brock, let me know if you want to sell some DAWGSTRUCTIONs, Brock. Um, have your people reach out to my people, and my people is me, by the way, Dean at Dog Post. Um, anyway, I do. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we could see 2 more games between Georgia and Bama. But everybody watching this knows the league doesn't roll like that, right? I mean, that's not really how the SEC has played, generally speaking. I mean, 16 we had Bama and Florida mismatch. 16, 17 we had Georgia and Auburn. That was a pretty tight matchup. And then we had 18, which was a clash of titans with Georgia and Bama in the about called it national championship and the SEC championship game. 19 LSU beating the Dogs. 20 Bama Florida, again the most matched up SEC championship game in history of the conference. And then a season ago with Georgia and Bama, once more the second time in 3 seasons. Yeah, 18, 19, 20, 21, 4 seasons, excuse me. So those two teams are the favorites to get back to Atlanta. And the question becomes, what of the 24 games those two teams are going to play, which game is the most likely to knock one of the two either out of the SEC championship game or to make it to where that game is not must win by both? Um, with Alabama, a season ago, they were in a must win situation in Atlanta and they won. I don't see a lot of losses on this schedule. Utah State will be a legitimate game. Now, how long it will be a legitimate game for Bama, I don't know. They're going to kill Texas. Uh, Louisiana Monroe, Vanderbilt at Arkansas. I don't see it, but okay. Texas A&M, that should be a lopsided Alabama victory. They got to go to Neyland. That could be tricky. And then they play State at home, should win relatively easily. And then a couple tough back-to-backs. LSU on the road and Ole Miss on the road. Mississippi has shown that it can score against Alabama. It's not shown that it can win lately. LSU, look, I think Brian Kelly is going to do a good job at LSU, but I don't know. We got to see it. And, of course, the end of the season game against Auburn. It's in Tuscaloosa. I'm trying to think of the last time that Bama Auburn was close in Tuscaloosa, and it might have been. I'm actually going to look that up while I rant here. But it's there's not a lot there. And then for the Dogs, they got State on the road, they got Kentucky on the road, the Gators, Oregon at the start of the season, but there's no obvious loss. The thing about it is, for Georgia and Alabama, there's not going to be a single obvious loss anywhere. Okay, the last few Iron Bowls in Tuscaloosa have been bloodbaths. 42-13, 52-21, 30-12 in 16. They had to fight their way through that one. But that's a pretty good beating. 55-44 against Nick Marshall and company, but that's a pretty good beating. 49-0, and then the Cam game in the comeback in 2010. So for the most part, these have been lopsided Alabama wins. Auburn has caused Alabama plenty of trouble, but typically, the wins in the last 10 years have been at Auburn. Auburn has done okay against the Tide there. I mean, last year they coughed up a loss in overtime. They won in 19. They won in 17. They lost by 16 and 15. They won in 13 with the kick six. So they've held their own at home. But I don't know if we're going to see anybody knock those two out of Atlanta. I think Georgia can lose for sure one of their first 12 games of the season. I'm not sure who they'll lose to, but I don't think that would knock them out of Atlanta. Alabama, they stand more of a chance of getting knocked out with one loss just because the West is so much better. But I'm not sure. I mean, Texas A&M can't hold its water long enough to not eat 4 losses and lose to Mississippi State and Ole Miss. And, it's just like, hey, it's great that you beat Alabama, but you got to follow it up by hoisting a trophy. And I don't mean the CarQuest Bowl or whatever. I mean, like, it's got to be something with the SEC championships have wood. I mean, you need to get splinters, man. It's time. But I don't know that I see a loss that prevents those two from meeting up in Atlanta. We'll see. But that's one thing that Bill Connelly was talking about. It's a pretty unique environment. Summarizing for him, we know a lot about Georgia and Alabama. That doesn't mean that it's certainly going to be Bama and Georgia, but it would not be shocking to see these two play in Atlanta. And then I don't even know where the championship game is, wherever the championship game is. Thank God it's not in Indianapolis again.